Sounds like a plan. Let's have all board members turn their videos on, and then we'll get rolling here as soon as the clock turns. Thanks.
Can't start my video because it's been disabled.
Okay, Board Member McHugh, I just gave you permission. There you go.
All right, and the clock says 4:31. So I think we'll call the meeting to order. And recording secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Let the record reflect that all board members are present except for Board Member Birch.
All right. And then I'll just like to remind everybody why we're here in this virtual setting. Due to the provisions of the governor's executive orders N 2520 and N 2920, which suspend certain requirements of the Brown Act and the order of the health officer of the County of Sonoma to shelter in place to minimize the spread of COVID-19, the Design Review Board will be participating via Zoom webinar. Members of the public can participate in the meeting virtually by going to Zoom and entering the meeting ID 948-0971-1719, or you can call by telephone 877-853-5257. That being said, let's move on to the minutes. Did everybody get a chance to look at the draft minutes from our regular board meeting on May 6th? Any corrections or changes? All right, let the record reflect that the minutes have been approved. At this time, we'd like to open up the floor for any member of the public wishing to speak on topics germane to our board's jurisdiction and purview, but not about items on the agenda this evening. So are there any members of the public wishing to speak at this time?
Chair Weigel, I don't see any raised hands right now. So if anybody would like to speak, if you can electronically raise your hand and we can call on you. No raised hands at this time.
All right, so then we'll move on to board business. This is where we read the board's charge from the city, from the zoning code. Zoning code chapter 20-52030F project review. The review authority shall consider the location, design, site plan configuration, and the overall effect of the proposed project upon surrounding properties and in the city in general. Review shall be conducted by comparing the proposed project to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards and requirements, consistency of the project within the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, and other applicable city requirements, e.g. city policy statements and development plans. So then we'll move on to board member reports. Do we have any board member reports this evening? Seeing none, we'll go to Bill for department reports. Interim Deputy Director Rose.
Thank you, Chair Weigel, members of the board. No department reports for tonight.
Excellent. And then item number 7, statements of abstention. Does anyone have an abstention on item 8.1 for this evening? Okay, I do. So I have to abstain from the item tonight as my wife works for the applicant design firm, the architectural firm. So therefore, I need to abstain. So at this time, I will turn the meeting over to Vice Chair Hedgepeth, and I will bid you all a good evening and have a great meeting.
Thank you, Drew, with that. So we have members Wicks, Sharon, Cordenbrock, and McHugh in the stable tonight. Is that our team for tonight?
Not Cordenbrock.
Not Cordenbrock. Okay. All right. Just checking in. Okay. So McHugh, Sharon, Wicks, and myself. And that collectively is our team. We haven't had anyone from the public wishing to speak on any other items. It appears at this point we would like to have a staff representation. Is this time for staff to illuminate us?
Yeah, we will call the next item to order. If you'd like, Warren, you can just read the preamble to the agenda item number 8 and then introduce Adam Ross. He's going to present tonight to staff.
Okay, that's fine. So we're here for a public hearing for the Sonoma Academy Performing Arts Center. It's a mitigated negative deck design review major for 2500 Farmers Lane, file number DR20-019. In the background there's a previously approved 17,984 square foot visual performing arts. And that was back in April 21st of 2016. We are now visiting this 5 years later. Do you want me to read the whole thing exactly? Or, all right. So
no, you've said enough. We can go right into the presentation if you'd like to just introduce it to Adam.
That's right. Yes, I'd like to introduce the applicant and staff into the proceedings. Is that the formal? The door is open?
The door is open. We can let Adam take it from here.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hedgepeth, members of the board. I'm Adam Ross, interim senior planner. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with the presentation. Okay, do you see that?
Connor, I'm sorry, Adam, you're actually presenting the, not the slideshow, but the internal version.
Okay, give me 1 second, sorry.
You'll have to stop sharing, and then when you select share screen, select the once it's already open. So open the PowerPoint first, like you're going to present it, and then click share and select the presentation mode. You just had it in.
Sorry, it's not looking the same. I can't tell what it looks like on your end because I thought I had it right. Give me 1 second. Does that look normal?
Yes, you're good to go.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Adam Ross, interim senior planner, project planner for this major design review application for the Sonoma Academy Performing Arts Center for the design review board on May 20th, 2021. Here's the project description. It's the design review for a 450 seat theater, Performing Arts Center. It includes 350 seat performance hall with 100 additional seats available in a mezzanine. It's kind of that little space above in the same room. It also includes some rehearsal spaces, a scene shop, academic teaching spaces, and support rooms. The project received an M&D was approved for the project in 2005 for the site as a whole, I should say, for the entire school. And like Vice Chair Hedgepeth stated, the design review for the Studios and Grange project came before the board in 2016, which was approved. Shortly after that, there was an approved hillside development permit with the project. The site is located in the southeast quadrant of the city. As you can see where the star kind of dictates the general location. It's located at 2500 Farmers Lane. And so it's kind of interesting is that it shows it's Farmers Lane, but it's really the end of Kiwanis Springs Road. So you see here, that's what I'm talking about. It turns into Farmers Lane, but it just kind of ends. So the future development would be here. But this is the overall site right here. This is part of the Studios and Grange project back in 2016 that was approved. Part of that project was built, being that the Studios and Grange, and there was an approved theater to go with it, which I'll kind of go over that a little bit in the presentation. But since then, there's been a design change for the theater and modifications to that, which is what's before you today. As you can see here, it's a Farmers Lane extension that's at some point in the future to be built out. So here's just a Google Street image of the site, that building again, that was part of the Studios and Grange project. The new theater will go in this kind of location right here, and there will be the internal courtyard. But this is the existing Sonoma Academy. So some of the project history, there's concept design review. There was adoption of the MND, recommendation for rezoning, and approval of a conditional use permit for the full build out of the site, and which included approximately 170,000 square feet of building space, up to 600 students, and I think 100 and something staff. And then shortly after, City Council adopts the MND and amended the Southeast Area Plan Policy Statement and PD District, which allow this school. And then 2005 preliminary design review for phase 1 was approved for the project. Since then, again, going to 2016, there was a Studio and Grange project approved. The general plan is very low density residential, which allows schools in this kind of area. It's appropriate for it's an existing school. It's appropriate for the neighborhood type of use, and there's existing residential surrounding the site. And then there's also Taylor Mountain Regional Park to the east. Zoning, PD 96-001D, that is the southwest area. I should make sure I have that right. It's the plan development for which this project is part of, and that's what the amendment to the previous policies, the plan development was back in 2005, 2006. Here's a site plan. Oops. Sorry. Here's the proposed building location, and then here's what was approved in 2016 of how the building was oriented. That's part of the change to what you're seeing today. As you can see, it kind of goes north and south rather than east and west, which was previous. And we've already seen that that other building that was included in the previous project. I don't believe that this image is completely to scale. So it's the difference in size is approximately 183 square feet in size, in square footage increase. Here's the previous elevations approved for the theater. So you can see here, there's stepping, and that's part of the hillside development permit. It's very similar to the overall stepping of the proposed unit, except there are new designs included with this. So this is for your consideration. I'll let the applicant team kind of go a bit more into the design and aesthetics. As you can see on this slide, you see the material types. Here's a bit more elevations. Here's some of the design guidelines that the project implements. It's the neighborhood, it provides more than just one use to the neighborhood, and it encourages neighborhood design that promotes pedestrian cyclists. So it's, you know, you can get to it, there's no real big cross traffic here. And the little flag denotes the location of where the school is was planned and is now existing. It also promotes, it integrates new development with this particular type of design. This image is kind of the overall campus as it is currently proposed, including the new building location here. You still have the kind of internal area here and some frontage courtyard as well. Here's some 3D renderings also in these slides. Some of the design guidelines for buildings, it breaks up mass of larger structures. It separates the buildings out. It dresses up all sides of the building with high quality materials rather than just one siding. So it's 4-sided architecture as well. And it divides buildings in segments that it breaks it down to scale as well. Here's some existing images. So where the new building is going to go. And here's some of the landscaping design guidelines that it implements. As you can see, it steps down with the building as well, and is planted along the way. So as part of the environmental review for this project, it's within the scope of the previously approved mitigated negative declaration, which was adopted in 2005. Which tiers from the Southeast Area Plan Environmental Impact Report, which was certified in 1994. The scope included 170,000 square feet of building and 600 students. This project, as proposed, presents no new or more severe impacts to that. Some of the public comments received were related to the noise associated with the use of the Performing Arts Center. In conversation via phone with a neighbor, there was also concern for the height, lighting, what the lighting would look like, and construction start times. A bit about that is, you know, there is an attachment presented by the applicant team stating, you know, the use would comply with the noise ordinance, the city's noise ordinance. The height is at its peak is 46 feet, whereas the original approval was approved at 45 feet, so it's a nominal difference. Lighting is subject to the city's lighting ordinance, and construction start times. There was a bit of conversation about that in previous approvals and review of the project. That where it limited the construction times as it relates to just normal construction times in the city. I think in the normal times is 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 9 to 6 on Saturdays, and no time on Sundays or holidays. In this case, there was as part of the initial approval of the entire site, construction time is limited to Monday through Friday, and no construction is allowed on Saturday and Sunday. And that was carried over into the resolution presented, the draft resolution presented before you today, condition number 2, which covers that, that previous limitation on construction timing. I believe it's 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And I could verify that shortly after if you don't have that open. And then with that, the Planning and Economic Development Department recommends that the Design Review Board by resolution approve the preliminary design review for the Sonoma Academy Performing Arts Center. And again, my name is Adam Ross, and I'm interim senior planner. to answer any questions you may have. The applicant team has presented a presentation as well.
Are there any questions to staff from board members? We can, why don't we proceed in this order? Member McHugh, do you have any questions?
Board member, yeah, there you go.
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Adam, do you have any questions?
Yes, thanks, Warren. Just one. Question about the previous resolution and continuing of conditions from the DRB meeting in 2016. Do the same conditions just kind of carry over since from that meeting, or are we is that kind of all tossed out and then we restipulate?
Well, so in drafting this condition, good question. In drafting this condition of approval, I looked through previous approvals and pulled what was applicable. In a lot of cases, it's wrapped up into condition number 1 of the resolution, which requires compliance with the MND resolution and the conditional use permit for the site and the hillside development permit.
Sorry, Adam, MND? Just a...
Mitigated negative declaration.
Excellent, thank you.
And then going through that and also found that made sure that the construction timing, which are hours limited 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and it's prohibited Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays that are recognized by the city of Santa Rosa. That was a carryover from the previous design review approval. The rest are standard or project specific, such as the Exhibit A from engineering associated with this project's review. And building permits are straightforward, and any sort of mitigation and fire conditions are specific to this review.
Okay, cool, thank you on that. And the ones that I was specifically looking at were, yeah, I see that. So there's 3 on the resolution number 16-927, but referencing the non-native invasive species, the planting of evergreens, landscape buffering on the north side. Just wondering if sort of that needs to be reiterated. Is that carried over, or does it, does it need to be restated?
I'm sorry, are you referencing from the previous?
Yeah, I'm looking at the DRB minutes from 2016, April 21st, that was included in our packet. And just looking at the resolution that the DRB, the Design Review Board, did then, just wondering if, since this is, the project has changed a bit, but it's not an entirely brand new project, does everything that we agreed upon, the conditions we put on it then, does that carry over? Like, I assume they're still considering it, but just wondering formally does it need to be reconditioned?
That's a good question. That's a great question, actually. So as far as what they've built up so far would have had to have complied with those conditions. But I'm not quite sure if we need to revisit them for this resolution specifically.
Okay.
I think
Yeah, I'll jump in real fast on that one. Board Member Sharon, essentially, for the most part, they're carryovers, but this is a de novo hearing of new. So you're more than welcome to comment. If you think there's something of importance, you can certainly enter it in. And if the rest of the board decides by a majority that it is important, it can be introduced. So it's at your pleasure.
Okay, gotcha. All right, yeah, no, that helps. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Adam. With that, Board Member Wicks, do you have any questions of staff?
No questions, but I think, Adam, I believe the answer to your question was it's in this current resolution. The hours of construction, for example, are limited on page 3 of our resolution that we're
going to consider this evening.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Henry, for pointing that out.
Thank you as well. I have no questions of staff, which leads us then to the presentation of the applicant. Is that true? Or we're going to have public questions?
Yeah, we're going to go with the applicant presentation, and then you can ask questions of the applicant if you'd like, and then, or you could wait and go to public comment, and then you can ask questions after that as well. Sometimes that works better because might be your questions might be informed by what you hear from the members of the
board. That's why I prompted that. It's preferable that we after we have the staff presentation, we will roll to public questions, comments, and then proceed.
That sounds great.
The applicant team has been given permission to unmute, and you guys can start when you're ready.
Does that look like a normal presentation? Is it good? Okay.
It looks like it has the notes sheet, Adam. I'm wondering if you can just go to straight presentation mode.
Sorry, it's giving me trouble tonight. I'll figure it out. Just bear with me. Sorry.
We can leave it if need be.
Vice Chair Hedgepeth, perhaps we take a five-minute break.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, we'll get this worked out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Adam, I'm not going to put the recess slide up so that you can continue to practice the getting that screen up the way you want it. That was Adam Ross, by the way.
Thanks, Mike.
So yeah, it's best to already press that presentation button and then press the share screen so you can select the presentation once it's already open. That's what I've noticed.
Is that normal?
Yep.
Okay.
You're good. You ready for me to call people back, or do you need a few minutes?
I'm good now.
Okay. DRB members, if you can turn your cameras back on, and Vice Chair will be able to go when you're ready.
It says that the host has stopped sharing video, or stopped me. There we go.
And that the applicant team does have permission to unmute at any time whenever you're ready.
Great. This is the applicant. I just want to check to see the audio is working. Can everyone hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent.
If we can just wait one moment, make sure, do we have all 4 board members back? I see board member Sharon. I saw Vice Chair Hedgepeth for a moment. I don't think we all have all 4 back yet.
Interesting. I see Warren. Oh, he's gone now.
I see Warren. I see board member Sharon, board member McHugh. So as soon as we see board member Wicks, then we can go ahead and go right into the applicant presentation.
And Adam, you're sharing the okay, there you go. Board Member Wicks, if you can hear me, if you can please turn on your video. All right, Vice Chair, it looks like all 4 of you are present now. Vice Chair Hedgepeth, are you ready for staff to start their presentation for the applicant? You're muted, Vice Chair.
Yes, please proceed with the applicant's presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. This is the applicant. Can I go ahead and just start?
Yes, you may.
Wonderful. Good evening, everybody. My name is Adam Woltag, and I'm a design partner with WRN Studios. We're thrilled to be here this evening to present to you the Sonoma Academy Visual and Performing Arts Center. And as noted, we were before this committee in 2016 when the project was originally approved, and we look forward to sharing with you some of the design revisions since the prior approval. Next slide. So as noted earlier this evening, staff presented kind of the context and location of the campus. As most of you know, it's a 33-acre campus located at the end of Kiwanis Springs Road, east of a single-family residential neighborhood and just west of the Taylor Mountain Preserve. Next slide. And as everyone knows, the campus rests at the base of the valley with eastern hillside views towards Mount Taylor and western horizon views across the valley toward the coastal ranges. The campus entry drive winds up from the gateway, past the sports field, the gymnasium, the Gildan Commons to the campus entry. Next slide. And that view in slide number 1 there is really kind of the view of the campus as you arrive. You can see the Gildan Commons in the foreground, and to the left of the Gildan Commons, you see utility shed and actually the site for the performing arts. Slide number 2 is taken from the Gildan Commons looking north toward the site there. It's not quite all the way where you see those photovoltaics, but just in that area where you see the shed. Slide number 3 is taken from really the hillside looking southwest toward the site from where the photovoltaics are. And slide number 4 is really looking at the site from the base, the lower garden level of the Gildan Commons. Next slide. So the overall site plan illustrates where the proposed Performing Arts Center will be in context with the rest of the campus. Key to note that the Performing Arts Center completes the north part of the campus and defines the central campus plaza with its entry focused inboard towards the existing campus buildings and really the campus heart. Next slide. So the upper plaza plan illustrates how the building touches the site more directly and supports and participates with the existing campus buildings and the outdoor spaces that support those buildings. Starting with the upper plan, which is the main plan of the building, note that the building has reoriented inward to face the heart of the campus, the central outdoor space that brings all the other buildings together, the Black Box Theater, the Gildan Commons, the library, and the administration building. Students move to the building across that plaza and under a low eave that aligns with the eave of the Gildan Commons, and then enter into the building. On performance night, guests would arrive and move from the western parking area through the lower garden space and up a campus stair or elevator into the glazed pre-function space before they move to their seats in the house. The stage is supported by a lot of back of house spaces that ring the house, like a scene shop, changing room, and a green room. And those are accessed from a corridor that joins them all together. On the lower level plan, that contains more support spaces for the theater and also provides access to the orchestra. Next slide. Now these are a few views from the three-dimensional model. And the image on the upper right is a view of the Performing Arts Center from that lower garden space, or maybe more appropriately, right at the campus drop-off. And you can see the eave and the open walkways of the Gildan Commons rolling inward, kind of framing and embracing the lower garden spaces, and then eventually joined with those spaces of the Performing Arts building. You can see the utility shed kind of in the foreground, which will be reclad to feel less like a leftover piece of campus infrastructure and a little bit more like an intentional element. And that marks where those pedestrian pathway from parking will bring people up through that garden space of Performing Arts building. The image on the lower left is a view of the main entry of the Performing Arts Center, as if you're seated under the eave of the Gildan Commons. And you can see the upper landing just to the left there where those people are standing. That is where the elevator rests and where those stairs from the lower garden, with the lower garden, from the lower garden level. Next slide. These are the this slide illustrates the north and south elevations and the proposed material palette on the right. Our materials were inspired by the existing campus material palette. The intent is for the Performing Arts Center to feel like it is a natural part of the campus architecture, even though it is something new functionally and programmatically. The primary building palette incorporates textured cement plaster for the curved walls of the house, board and batten wood siding, which is used on many of the existing campus buildings, and zinc standing metal seam panels, again, another reference to the existing roofs of campus buildings. Secondary materials like concrete masonry units and board form concrete are experienced more from the lower garden level. Next slide. And as you can see here, illustrated on the west elevation, which shows how the building connects the lower campus to the upper campus level. You see there the zinc-clad teaching and support spaces, which are capped by that continuous eave, overhang and shade the lower level of the Performing Arts Center. Just next to them, you see the wood-clad elevator core, the campus stair. Those again bring people from that parking area up to the main level. And then the east elevation, which faces the hillside and the campus fire road. That shape profiles the volume of the house. And here you see how the house, and you see underneath that shaded area, that eave, you see a house window that brings daylight into that audience space and also provides cover and protection for access doors that lead into the back of house area and the scene shop. And that concludes the presentation. Sorry to throw another Adam into the mix here. Maybe a little confusing. If we had brought our theater consultant, his name's Adam, we'd have quorum.
Right.
I had 5 Adams in my 4th grade classroom, so I'm used to having a lot of Adams.
All right, I feel so bad.
Well, thank you for that presentation. As Bill Rose mentioned, that was wonderful, very succinct and clear. We can, with the audience, any public parties, fresh in their minds after this presentation, they're free now. We have a clock timer of 3 minutes for anyone who wishes to join the proceedings from the public to ask any questions or comment with the applicant.
Okay, Vice Chair Hedgepeth, we have one hand raised, Martin Seeger, and we're going to get the timer set up here in a minute. And then when you're ready.
And just for the record, this is the opening of the public hearing, and then at the conclusion, we'll close the public hearing.
Thank you. And then we will have another speaker after Mr. Seeger. Okay. All right, Mr. Seeger, you can unmute at any time.
So actually, this is Leslie Mantufel. I'm at 2250 Hibiscus. Martin Seeger's here as well, but we only could raise one hand because we're on the same computer. Just as a
but we live in 2 different houses, so.
So I'll go ahead and start. I have 2 points. The first being with respect to the issue raised as far as construction hours. I just wanted to express my support for maintaining the construction hours that are in the draft resolution. That was a significant issue, or an issue that had an extensive amount of discussion back in 2016. The area gets quite a bit of an echo from where the construction takes place, and it's facing residential neighborhoods, both directly, or I should say due west as well as northwest. Following the approval of these construction hours, I just wanted to add that we had a bit of experience with them doing, or the school doing construction after the first approval occurred. And the school does have a difficult time maintaining or following the hours that were put in place. By way of example, this construction time is to start at 7:30. Their workers would often arrive between 6:30 and 7, and they would leave their vehicles idling. I spoke with Adam about this issue, and while I understand that code enforcement is the route to go, it would be nice to keep those hours in place, and maybe the applicant could make a cognizant effort to abide by them this go around. So I give my support, or like to have item number 2 remain in that draft resolution to mitigate some of the construction noise that the surrounding neighbors will hear. The second item I have is with respect to the change in design. In looking at the old or the previously approved plans, and I understand that was on attachment 11, and it's page 22 and 23. And the new proposal, which is attachment 3, pages 7 and 8, the look of the building has changed significantly. And when the original plan was presented back in 2016, the building that was presented had, the aesthetic of it was such that it blended in more with the buildings that were already existing at the school and with the surrounding area, kind of more of an open space look. And the newly proposed building looks nothing like that. And from the perspective of a homeowner that will be seeing the northwesterly vantage point, it looks like I will now be looking at potentially a concrete wall. And I'd like maybe the board or the applicant, if they could, address the issue with respect to the change in the aesthetics, and maybe give some consideration to a plan that was, it seems to me is quite different than what is currently pending before the board. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Leslie. We appreciate your comments. You have another party occupying your house there. It'll be your name, but he can state his name and work from the same computer. Is that our next step?
Yes, that's correct, Warren. The next speaker will get their 3 minutes at this point.
They can state their name and their address of where they actually live, if they wish. Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Martin Seeger. I live at 2244 Hibiscus. That's the north side of the old Christopherson subdivision. I'm right on the apex of Hibiscus, the curve there, and I look right out at the school. And I've been living with the school and its construction almost from the beginning. And my neighbor, Ms. Mantufel, was exactly right about the construction time. That was a lengthy discussion that some of you may recall at the public hearing before. What would happen is, even though the hours were set at 7:30, trucks would get there early because they're mostly out-of-town contractors and they wanted to get an early start and beat the traffic. And they start lining up, idling the trucks. Sometimes they'd honk their horns. Sometimes they get out and play music on the radios. Sometimes they'd slam their cab doors. And it made a mockery of it. And of course, the school had nobody there of any responsibility at 7 o'clock in the morning. None of the administrators lived there or live around there. And so it was just pretty much a disaster. And the response from the city was to call code enforcement or the police. well, we don't want to call the police over something like that. That's totally inappropriate. And code enforcement is an after the fact issue. So I would ask that the board put some teeth into this to make it a little bit more restrictive on the school to live within the terms of their permitted agreement. The other thing is the appearance. The appearance before was of kind of a country barn-shaped building. This is more like a downtown Los Angeles wall of concrete. It would be more appropriate in a big city. That hillside is rural. It's filled with trees. There's cows on the hillside. Nothing in that area looks like that building. And that may be the city's intent. It may be the new design that the city wants to have, but it is totally dissimilar. And so we will look out of our windows at a concrete wall. One solution might be to color the wall so it's not stark white. I'm not sure that would help. There was talk about doing that on the gymnasium, and that did help. But I think the most important consideration for me is the noise in the construction town. So Monday through Friday, 7:30 to 6 is doable, but I would encourage you to put some teeth in the ordinance so that the school is obligated to comply with it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Martin. We appreciate your kind words. Are there any other parties wishing to speak about the project from the public?
Yes, we have one more hand raised, Steve Osborne. And Mr. Osborne, you can unmute and speak whenever you're ready.
Hi, this is Steve Osborne. My office is to the north of the school, on the hillside above the school, and I've had an ongoing battle with them about the amount of noise they make with amplified music. And we've, after a long time, I pointed out there's a noise ordinance in the city of Santa Rosa, and that they can't go 15 decibels above, or they need a permit if they go 15 decibels above the ambient noise level. I don't know if they've actually done that, but this spring, it's been a problem because of COVID. They've had to keep all the windows open, and you can hear the amplified instruments loud and clear, not only in my office, but throughout the neighborhood. And I'm very concerned about how that would play out with this new auditorium. Are all the practice rooms going to be sealed off so that they're essentially soundproof? And I just think they have to be more sensitive to how their noise affects their neighbors, and particularly, I'm a writer, and so the noise is really a problem for me. Other than that, I don't have any comments on the visual elements, but that's my primary concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, as well. We appreciate that. With that, Patty, are there any other members of the public wishing to share thoughts?
I don't see any more raised hands. So if anybody listening in would like to do a public appearance, if you could raise your hand, we can give you permission to unmute. And Vice Chair Hedgepeth, I'm not seeing any raised hands.
All right. With that, I believe, Bill, we have two options here. We can proceed with questions and comments. Seeing that it's a final design review, perhaps breaking this in two and having questions of the applicant before comments has merit?
Yeah, I would recommend that. Yeah, I think you can ask the applicant team. We also have the applicant's CEQA consultant is here as well, if you have any questions related to that. And then once you conclude that, you can go into board deliberation.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd like to go ahead and do that. So let's proceed then in the same order.
Really quick, Vice Chair Hedgepeth, can you please officially close the public hearing for the record?
Oh, yes. Let me see if I can do that. Where do I close that?
Oh, you just verbally need to state that.
Just state it for the record.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. I'm stating for the record the public hearing is now closed, and we will proceed into questions of the applicant by our board members, starting with Board Member McHugh.
I have no questions at this time.
Thank you for that. We'll move on to Board Member Sharon then.
No questions, Chair or Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you too. With that, Board Member Wicks, any questions of the applicant?
Yes. I couldn't find in our packet, and a lot of information here, a lot of good information presented by the applicant and staff. Thank you for that. But I couldn't find the previous application that was approved with the pitched roofs on it. And my first question is, as best I can determine by the proposed sections that we have before us tonight, that the building height was, there's a datum at 44.7.5, and this is taken from the architectural set of drawings, sheet A 6.1. Section 2 is the only kind of close to building height, but it looks like it's about 5 feet taller than that. So let's call it 50 feet height for the current building. What was the height of the ridge, and or can you give the board some context on the prior design height, and just a quick overview on why the major design change?
I think that's an applicant question, but I can point you to, in the meantime, attachment 11 has the previously approved plans, and I believe that's page, let's see, 20, sheets 22 and 23, somewhere around that.
Yeah, it doesn't change the question. I'd like to know what the height of the previous project that was approved by the design review board relative to the best I can interpolate a 50-foot building height as currently being proposed to us.
Got it.
Yeah, thanks, Board Member Wicks. I think that question would be best answered by the applicant or the architect on this one.
Yeah, I thought aren't we in the applicant question phase?
Yeah, if we could make sure for the recording secretary, if the applicant can unmute so they can respond.
Yep, this is Adam, the applicant with WRNS Studio, and I'll address that question, and also the question about some of the changes in the design and how that affected the height. I think that's really what we're trying to get here. I think the best way to come at this is to say that this design, we feel, is a much more responsive design, right? It's a design that actually uses the hillside that it sits on in a much better way, with less cut and fill than the initial design that was approved in 2016. That's moved the building farther west, away from the neighborhood and up the hill. So I think you can see that in the comparison, board members. And it's rotated the building almost 90 degrees away from a east-west orientation to a kind of a north-south orientation, which has placed the house up at the level of the main campus plaza, where in the prior design, the entry to the house was at the lower level of campus off of that lower garden. So that's where you're probably seeing some of the discrepancies in the height. It's not exactly the same height. It's relatively close, but that rotation has done a number of really great things for the project. Again, it's reduced the amount of construction, excavation, removal of soils, because it's working with the hillside in a much better way. And we feel acoustically, because I think there was another comment from the public, it actually moves most of the energy and the entrance and all of the things that would cause ambient noise inside of that plaza space up at the top. So it's taking it from the lower level and moving it up into the interior of the campus.
So is in all of the movement of the building, the rotation, and I think I can appreciate, and hopefully the neighbors will be able to appreciate the fact that you're removing less dirt should translate to less time on the site, less noise, et cetera. But is it, so are you saying that it's relatively the same height, your tall textured cement plaster parapet wall, which is the highest point of the building, is it relatively at the same height of where the pitched roofs were?
No, it is taller, and I'm sorry, I don't have the older sections in front of me. It is taller, but it's at the same height of the pitched roof of the Fitzsimmons building, which is the black box theater. So it matches the height of existing buildings on campus, but it is higher relatively than the 2016 approved pitched roof scheme.
Okay. Another question for you, Adam. On your color board there, the cement textured plaster that you're calling out, is that a precast panel, or how are you achieving that texture that is delineated in your renderings?
That's a great question, and this is something we spent a lot of time thinking about. It's going to be a pretty traditional cement plaster finish that will reflect a lot of the existing cement plaster finishes on campus, with a caveat. Two things. One, those walls are slightly curved, so they're not a flat surface like the gymnasium, and I think there was a lot of concern at one time about the blankness of that facade. We heard that loud and clear. So those walls are curving. And then the finish we're looking at is a heavy sand finish, right? Which we think is going to play much better with the light as opposed to a very flat finish. This will have a much more depth to it. And then we will be incorporating vertical joints along those curved walls, obviously to help reduce crack, but also to help give it a lot more texture. So we're really thinking a lot about what those curved walls of the house, which are the highest elements of the building, how they capture light, how they do shade and shadow, and how they have a nice texture, again, in response to the blankness of the gymnasium. No offense to that other design.
Okay, great. One last question for you, related to the color board. And maybe you were pulling some of the Guild and Commons building over in one of your early renderings, but if you go back in your package of the view from the Guild, there's horizontal siding on the new building, yet the color board calls for board and bat siding. And I'd also like to have you explain your board and bat representation. It's not a traditional farm style board and bat, and I was just kind of curious if you could elaborate on.
I'm glad you noticed that. Not too many people do, so I love talking about that. So you're absolutely right. The Guild and Commons has a rain screen, horizontal board rain screen, which was most appropriate for that building. There was a lot of wood surface on it. And we took that element of wood and applied it to a number of different places in the new project. The lower shed, the utility shed, which is a CMU kind of pitch roof building, we're going to clad that in that same wood material. So now that feels a part of the Guild and Commons language. Looking at the Performing Arts Center, we thought that building had an opportunity to speak to the existing campus buildings, which is why we wanted to use the board and batten. But we didn't go with the traditional, very repetition kind of static pattern. This is a building about music, it's about art, it's about performance. And so what we're doing is staggering that pattern a little bit. So it looks a little bit more inspired by kind of a sheet of music than anything else. So there's a cadence to it. So it's going to cast shadows differently, where the battens are closer together and then when they pull apart. So I think the light will change across that element, because it's actually a very tall element. It's the elevator core that goes from the lower level to the plaza level. And it faces kind of welcomes you as you come to the site. So that element, we spent a lot of time thinking about how that would capture light. It's made out of wood, so it speaks to the rest of the campus, speaks to the Guild and Commons. And then one last thing on the wood question, it's a good one. That large eave that welcomes and faces the center of campus, that's we're proposing a CLT element. It's a laminated timber element, which is the exact same element we have for the eave of the Gildan Commons. So again, trying to capture elements from the Gildan Commons to really change the way we saw the campus, but also be respectful and capture elements from the existing buildings.
Great, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Board Member Wicks. Yeah, I appreciate the applicant's comments here. I was present back in the, I think I go way back to 2006 cycles here, but understanding the metamorphosis or the evolution of buildings, the introduction of the Commons building and its architecture, and the board embracing that. I know that there are some members of the public. I know Steve Osborne, who lives more in the older section of the hill. My recollection is, firstly, you have this buffer of these solar panels. The hill does climb to the north, and what I understand, you can explain this more, but if you have a very large barn form with a ridge line, and I'll use the word refine or morph your program to having a performance hall with, instead of a rising barn roof, what you're doing is you're creating a more stealth eave line. The skirting of the performance hall are the ancillary uses. And as I look at the north elevation perspective, perhaps this addresses some comments from the public, that is an almost no window, no penetration world there. Correct me as I go here, but as I see the intent of taking materials and minimizing the use of materials, instead of using a lot of stick lumber to create a large barn volume, you're creating a more, I'll use the word diminutive element at the receiving area, that it appears that noise generation to the north, that's not a gathering area. There's a perspective, you do have, I'm just looking at seat Jeep 0.7, and I'm sorry to the members of the public here, because I think that may be in the presentation, but my recollection going back to maybe about the 2014 cycle was you had a landscape architect that was marshaled to landscape the Commons building. Now that you're back in at it with the performance building, you have a question about tree planting and solar panels. You have an EVA fire road. I think you know where I'm speaking of. If everyone understands the site plan, you've got an EVA fire lane that skirts around the building. Now the building is rotated 90 degrees, so it's northerly area. You've got an EVA road snugging up against that. Then there's some buffering of trees that are noted there. Then there's the solar panels. So am I speaking out of your lane here? Is this a general, am I cognating correctly what the things you were trying to do with building massing and perhaps a deliberate effort in shaping that building's north side?
Yes, Vice Chair, those are great observations, and thank you for sharing them. Yeah, you know, the elevations and the materials were that kind of came about in a way, we think, in reaction to our initial proposal in 2016. And you know, I was a part of that proposal. I know that proposal very well. And we, you know, that building was, I would say, 90% board and batten wood. You know, the whole thing was a giant, you know, board and batten building with eaves. And it felt, I'll follow my sword. It felt pretty bulky, and it felt pretty kind of a one-liner. And I think once we rotated the building and, you know, working with the whole team, our associated architects and in our committee, we were able, we think, to kind of right size those spaces and use materials to help break the mass and bulk of the building down into what was most necessary. So you're absolutely right. You know, the house is as big as it needs to be, and really not much more. It's just really that is what the big, we just capped it. It was a flat roof at one time, but I think it didn't resonate with the community. So we gave it a little bit of shape, a very subtle curve in two planes, which is, the eave line that you can see, the parapet line, and then we push those walls in. And then we have a lower volume, which is really a continuation of the language of the Gildan Commons, which captures, again, a flat roof to lower the volume down as much as we can, to capture the support spaces and the teaching spaces around it. And regarding landscape, your last point, the garden now, which is on the west edge of that site, does wrap around to the north. You're right, and it slopes up there, and there's an orchard that's planned along that, in that area. It's a teaching garden, it's a learning garden, it's not just an ornamental garden, it has an active academic use. And the rotation of this building allowed the school to activate these spaces to be teaching environments, right? Real
Yes.
Fantastic garden spaces, so, yeah.
And I think I wanted, it's maybe a question / comment. We're going to move to comments soon here, but being aware of the previous barn-like building, I think it is in the package for those of you who couldn't find it, but there were a series of solar panels in the barn presentation, which obviously bore their souls out as a large array on the roof. It appears that the purpose of the parapet in your sheet music performance auditorium, as we call it, is that now you're taking all those panels, they're in the bathtub of the roof, out of sight and mind.
That is true. The visual impact is going to be vertical, pointed to the sky, and less. Less facing outward towards the view. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, those are our questions. We have a closed public hearing, and we have a procedure here, Robert's Rules, where a board member courageously comes forward to create a motion, and we will look at that motion. We have 3 resolutions, and we've had some clear notes from the public. And I think at this point, Bill, have I left anything out? Our functions from this point on are that the foursome here gets together. There is going to be a motion. We have 4 resolutions before us, each one to address. So whoever wishes to come forward needs to collectively either singularly have a roll around for each motion, or aggregate together all 3 resolutions in the form of a motion. Is that a legally proper and endorsable democratic thing to do?
Well, I just want to say, yeah, thank you. We've gone through just about most of the procedural things. We're right up to the point that you just described. We're ready for some motions. We do have to have a motion. We do have to have a second to get the item on the table for discussion. I'm going to defer to Mr. Ross. Do we have a CEQA resolution on its own?
No, it's within the scope of the previous the previous MND.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, there's actually no resolution, Chair Hedgepeth, for the mitigated negative declaration. The approach on this relative to CEQA is we're finding this project consistent with the scope of the previous adopted mitigated negative declaration. So at that point, Adam, I'm going to turn it to you in terms of the order of the resos that you would like. Well, there's just one reso, right?
There's one resolution, yes.
Yeah. So it's just one resolution. That makes it really simple. So Vice Chair Hedgepeth, what we would look for is any board member to make a motion on that design review resolution. We'll get a second, then you can go into your deliberations. If there are any friendly amendments, we'd follow the same approach. It's basically a motion, a request to the motion maker, a second acceptance, and then we'll work our way down to a final vote on that resolution.
Thank you. Thank you. I was just remarking, the reason I brought this up was I know that there was an item about construction hours in the draft resolution back in 2016, and or basic construction behavior et al. that in the draft motion here, is that language part of that? Was that an inclusive, or was that just a reflection of the 5-year-old resolution that we're not acting on?
So the condition, and sorry if I'm not answering this correctly, but condition number 2 of the draft resolution before you carries over those previous construction hours that limit the project. Limits the project's construction hours. So those are included in this draft resolution. And I know there was discussion about adding more to it, but that's obviously those would be amendments made by the board.
Thank you. That was the clarification I needed. Well, with that, thank you, staff and applicant. We will then proceed to hear from Board Member McHugh on his, well, actually, it's going to be one of the 3 of you. My bad. Any one of the 3 of you may come forward now with a motion, should you wish.
Vice Chair Hedgepeth, I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution of the Design Review Board of the City of Santa Rosa granting preliminary design review approval for the Sonoma Academy Performing Arts Center located at 2500 Farmers Lane, APN 044-200-036, file number DR20-019, and waive further reading of the text.
Thank you, Board Member McHugh. Okay. So the second's coming from Board Member Wicks. Okay. With that second, do we have any friendly amendments, any board comment to go back through? We're going to allow each of you to share anything you wish to add to the cart or not add to the cart, so shall we say. So
Vice Chair, that's just a suggestion. A simple way would be you could just go down the line, enter into the discussion. This board historically has had some back and forth discussion, but one way to kick off that is to just kind of go down the line. And then if there's some consensus on any suggestions that come up that are beyond what's in that draft resolution, that's where we could entertain the friendly amendment.
That's fine. Well, down the line discussion, we'll start with you again, Board Member McHugh.
I'll to open up the discussion. I support the comments of my fellow board members related to this project, and those are my comments, and so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you, Board Member McHugh. Board Member Sharon, discussion, thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Vice Chair. And thank you, Planner Ross, for shepherding this process, this project through the process. And thank you to the applicants for comprehensive package and all of the information, and for bringing a valuable iteration of your design. And appreciate all the detail and materials we received. Thank you. It definitely makes our job a little bit easier to percolate on it and chew on it too. So I think, I am supportive of the project. Definitely. It's I think a beautiful building. I appreciated hearing your comments in regards to the evolution of the design. I believe that you're treating the site sensitively. The buildings are very thoughtfully done and quite beautiful too. So well done on that. With the landscape plans, I would have liked to see a little bit more detail, mainly in terms of, of plan palettes and just a little more specificity. I recognize that it's probably in progress and within the process, and I know that Carducci Associates, I trust that they're doing great work, as they do. I'm familiar with some of their work. And so I'm sure that is all being thought of. I did want to make certain, because it was brought up during that 2016 meeting. Thank you, Board Member Wicks, for pointing out to the draft resolution that all of the comments from the 2016 board resolution will be carried over, specifically in terms of, I wanted to make certain to emphasize that with the plant palette, the emphasis on the non-invasive plant materials. This is situated, as you guys know, is situated adjacent to natural areas, and want to see that I would love to see the design reflect those natural areas and mesh into them. One of the things I like about these types of landscapes when you're adjacent to a natural area is that there's an opportunity to have the formally designed landscape around the buildings, but then have that meld into the surrounding area. And I think that this is a great opportunity to do that. And so having the formal bleed into the liminal spaces as you're going out. With the shifting of the building, and I appreciate you also for walking through the shifting of the building, because I was wondering about the shifting of the productive garden area and I didn't bring that up in the questions before because it's more of a programmatic question. And I'm glad to see that the school is still emphasizing that. I assumed that it was. I like the addition of, or the emphasis on that hillside orchard. I like to see that the productive garden area is, in the first iteration, 2016, it was very, formal with planting beds, rectilinear and everything. Now it's a little more, it's more site specific and fits in. And I commend you on that. And that's one of the reasons where I think that, all of this is being thought through. With the plant palette, I would definitely love to see using the landscape, the landscape materials and even the choice of materials for the buildings to be seen as educational opportunities. This is a school after all, and the children will be there using this all the time. And so emphasizing the opportunities of education, how we fit into ecology, how, renewable resources, pollinators, pollinator pathways, habitat corridors as well. This is a literal habitat corridor with being adjacent to Taylor Mountain and then, naturally, and then with being adjacent to a neighborhood and, proposed Farmers Lane extension, there's, human pathways as well. That's all related. And I would just, this is just, to bring up design feedback, which I'm sure you're thinking of to really emphasize that. If I had a little more detail with the landscape plans, I wouldn't necessarily feel the need to emphasize that. But I just want to make thought of. I'm sure it is. And I think this will be a beautiful addition to the campus and really flesh it out from what has been done there and is going to be there. It's I'm over at Taylor Mountain and Fairmount, hiking and with my son there too, and it's a quite lovely development on the other side of the little valley there. And so continue to think site specifically, and I look forward to seeing this built and seeing the completion of the campus. Thank you. Muted, Warren.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Sharon. Go ahead, Board Member Wicks now and share with us.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. I think the applicant hit the nail on the head when he described the prior design solution as being bulky. I think this new project before us in its current design, I think is fabulous, and I think it has some museum-like qualities to it that will have it hold up over the test of time and look fresh, with the exception of I'm going to have to trust the applicant to execute that curved wall. It curves up and down, and it also curves in the other direction. And what I was picking up, and what I know Revit and some of the other design simulation programs do, is they give it a verticality to each facet as it rolls around. But I like that look. I like the faceting of it, and I'm again, I just have to trust you on how that looks. If it looks like in the construction drawing on page A5.2, for example, and it's just while it has some curvedness to it, and it's just a standard stucco finish, I think it's an opportunity lost to do something spectacular to more represent what is shown on your color boards. And again, I'll commend you on those colors in the color board. It helps that museum-like quality of the building really come together with, especially like the zinc paneling you selected. I like the playfulness of the board and back, creating some irregular notes, not a long, consistent note like we can fall into of a pattern with our architecture sometimes, but have some playfulness to it. I'm extremely supportive of the project, and I'm glad you're removing less dirt on the hillside, and hopefully that'll cut down on construction costs and help with integrating this building into the neighborhood.
Warren, you're muted still.
All right. Thank you, Board Member Wicks. Yes, I'd like to resonate the following. In a wonderful way, I really take to heart a lot of what a context is, a lot of what neighbors wish for in this campus of education and learning. Yes, there are agrarian forms, and the original campus started that way. The Commons building is obviously something that was really focusing on sustainability. It had far more browse, overhangs, areas for the inside-outside, the learning that we know happens not just inside a building, but interstitially with the full outdoors are these layered spaces. I find it very appealing that this building echoes in many ways the Forefront Commons building. It's almost like someone 90 years from now will come to the site thinking that the pioneer buildings on site perhaps were built in the 1800s, that these two buildings in the front are not a sharp stick in the eye, that they resonate with purpose. For those of you that don't know a lot about performing arts, this thing is a true drum shape. It's the acoustics of decoupling and making that hall work actually benefit the neighbors. When you take a giant barn and you try to put kettle drums in it, you've got to chase all kinds of mathematics around. And this building, if you look at the sections, it's wonderful. It reminds me of Alvar Aalto. It's kind of Danish. When the Scandinavians do architecture like a chair, the chair has function on all ends and all purpose. So the Scandinavians design a building like a piece of furniture. Everything has purpose. Nothing is left to a scattered mind. And I think it's wonderful that the ancillary functions are subordinated and they actually layer and decouple this hall. And in many ways, when you drive by, if you love music, you're going to say that's a performing center. And to Henry's point, by having deep scores and grooves, the telltale uglies of stucco applications that sometimes are ill-placed. If you try to take a huge wall and not put heavy crevasses in it, it is a telltale eyesore at certain lights of the day. So all these things come into play. This is extremely thoughtful. I've studied that, bathrooms aren't going to bother neighbors to the north. The green room, as we mostly call it, but the scene shop, that's not necessarily a noisy space. And the classrooms down to the parking lot side are really pulling away from the neighborhood. I don't want to wear out my thoughts in general, but I am a real proponent of purpose in buildings, and that when this board was formed decades ago, a gas station can look like a gas station, a warehouse can look like a warehouse, but when you do a museum or when you do a library, it should have the function. It should look like that. I don't know of many libraries that look exactly like a cow barn that I would say maybe meet the mark. But I think this is actually a perfect blend in the hillside, and it pays homage to the other buildings. So collectively, the campus is deliberate, is tasteful, and I think it's actually more of a thrill than a secret. And I think that's okay for educational campuses. So those are my architectural comments. The reason I was mentioning to staff earlier, we have these motions that can be amended. The dignity of staff and the campus and whoever's appointed in construction management, I'm sure that the dean and the school board has hired a fine builder, and the builder needing to make sure subs don't show up at 5:38, with a big diesel truck and play radio music and all that. I believe it's not so much changing the hours. I mean, you could pull another half hour before and half hour later, dead quiet, but it's a question of whether the people that made the motion want to add anything about the academy having some party which is not faculty, which stewards, which is corporal or lieutenant in nature, which has authority to tell the builder how to behave. I don't know how that's exactly worded, but I know in construction, for instance, Memorial Hospital or other institutions, there are ways and means by which payment to said builders are more timely because of stewardship. I don't know, that's maybe too scary that they wouldn't be paid if they didn't behave, but do you see where I'm going with this?
So Chair Hedgepeth or Vice Chair Hedgepeth, if I may, my recollection is that the construction hours were a topic of, I believe, some considerable discussion. It's certainly will affect the construction schedule overall. If there's a desire from the board, and I haven't heard it specifically yet, but if there is to modify that in some way, I would strongly encourage a discussion, consultation with the applicant team to see how that works with them. You may even ask them if they have anything to add to this discussion, or if my recollection is a fair assessment of previous discussions.
Excellent, and I recall those very much, Bill, that those happened in the past, and I think it is excellent protocol and recommendation to have the applicant perhaps address this, since neighbors have brought it up. So we can hear again from the applicant about perhaps their strategy here.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Steve Von Reisfeld. I am a Board of Trustee member and chairman of the Construction Management Committee for this project. So I'm probably of the members of the applicant here, because we have the architects and we have our secret consultant, but I don't think any of them want to speak to this issue. And I understand this issue very well, because I was not on CMT, which is the anachronism for construction management, in the board for the last project. And I can honestly say that the general contractor we had was probably as trying for the owner as they were for the neighbors. And they are not our contractor anymore. We have DPR, which is a large firm that does work, Stanford, lots of places. I'm sure you've heard of them.
Yes.
And in the interview process, we made it very clear to them that we were not going to, nor did we want the neighbors to suffer the misery that we suffered under the previous contractor. But having said that, I mean, that I can make that commitment, but I think to Chair Hedgepeth's point, putting some structure or framework around it probably makes sense. We are more than happy to have some kind of a steward regular occurring meeting. I'm not sure exactly what to offer, not because I'm trying to be evasive. I'm just trying to figure out what would be a process that we could have, but I can state that we're open to that.
Thank you for that. I feel relatively trustworthy here. The blunt thing is that with Edison, if the power did not work until 6:59, that's clear. But that's me going over the mark. I'm just trying to demonstrate to you that DPR is a great firm. You're embarrassed by what happened in the past. As a acting chair here, vice chair, I'm going to go with it that you are going to do all you can to help be a good neighbor with this new 5-star contractor, and that I don't have to get into details, nor do the board members, about the function of how you implement that. Just that everything you learned in the past is brought forward, and if neighborhood complaints happen, one of the members of the public mentioned that once these resolutions are made, there's no teeth and there's no recourse. I just wanted to be a good neighbor and have this wonderful campus, which is a stellar example of education, that somehow it's brought to pass that you're hearing this, and that DPR will be gracious, just like they are at Stanford.
That is our intent, and what I would encourage is if there's an impression in the neighborhood that we're not meeting the intent of the ordinance and people are slamming doors and trucks at 6 a.m. I mean, and maybe the appropriate protocol is to go through planning first, but we want to hear from them. We do, because we had troubles on our side of the ledger with our last contractor as well.
Okay. So that's great. And the whole thing about if amplifiers were turned up and it was bass guitar time for Woodstock music, and the other comment I heard about the writer here, Steve, is that somehow in stewarding internally to the building, it appears that the room functions you have there are such that they appear to be more diminutive in their sound projection, but that's just another curious hope.
Board Member Wicks, I saw you had your hand up. Did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just want to continue the discussion just a little bit, and Steve, I appreciate you making it a priority on your end and letting this group and the forum and the public listening know that you want to make some changes from past experience. And I just was wondering on Warren, in your experience, or maybe Steve, if you know if the city was going to require a construction management plan. I know we've done them on other projects in the past, and I may be thinking of a county project we did recently, and it's not a city of Santa Rosa requirement, but and maybe it's just a simple gesture on your part, Steve, of offering up a construction management plan, and self-policing and being open to fielding a call from a neighbor to take on complaints, not bother the police, not bother the inspectors at the city of Santa Rosa that enforce things after the fact. But I could see putting a nice construction management plan in place on this.
I'm not opposed to that at all, Member Wicks. I'm curious. Is that a document we submit to staff? And we may be thinking the same thing. What I'm thinking is, obviously, in these construction projects of this size and magnitude, there are weekly what we call OAC meetings, which are meetings with the owner, architect, and the contractor. We talk about anything from safety to current issues. I don't mind telling DPR and their superintendent that agenda item 1 is check in with the neighbors on issues. And if there's identified issues, what are the actions taken to mitigate those? Maybe that's just a reoccurring item, and the neighbors will give them a primary contact person on campus, and we're more than happy to keep, planning department involved. I mean, is that what you're thinking about when you say construction management plan?
Yeah, well, where on-site parking would be, where staging the materials is going to be, things like that. But at the same time, maybe just, I know you'll have a sign out front, coming soon. Maybe in the lower fine print, if neighbors have issues, please contact Steve Von Racefield.
Right. Well, I think you answered my question, Henry.
It has your cell number and your home address on it too.
Yeah.
It'll probably be a senior member of the campus faculty, but you answered your question. In our negotiations to interview and hire DPR, one of the things we told them was we actually have the plan you're talking about. I said, we need to know where all the parking is. We need to know where materials are being staged. We need to know delivery hours on a bi-monthly basis. And to DPR's credit, they looked at us absolutely shocked. They said, because their comment was, what happened last time? And I said, you don't want to know what happened last time. He said, well, we do that on all our jobs. Of course we'll do that. So I'm happy to share a draft of that with planning department if that helps with staff. I mean, I don't know. What makes sense?
So I can offer a suggestion. Actually, perhaps I can get Adam Ross to jump back on because he has put together just some draft language for kind of a conversation starter. Adam, I saw your message come through. Maybe you can read it into the record for a suggestion and see if this might suffice.
Yeah. So we do see this on other resolutions at times, and so I just a recommended language for a condition would be the applicant shall designate a neighborhood liaison and post their contact information at the construction site. And obviously you can modify that as you wish, but that's just a suggestion.
And there's one other thing, and I am sorry we don't have a building staff at the ready. They may do this already, but often just clear communication helps, especially for the staff that are going to be going out there on a regular basis, the inspectors. So I believe it may happen, but we could put a line item in here that says, a pre-construction coordination meeting shall occur between the applicant team, the contractor, planning, building, key city staff, just to sit down and kind of go through it. I think I'm confident that planning can convey what we're hearing tonight in terms of the concerns of the neighbors, and often just putting everybody on notice that these are important things to kind of be on the lookout for. It's clear we have an applicant team that is more than willing to cooperate on this effort. So that could be another suggestion to go along with what Adam just mentioned.
I think both of those are excellent suggestions.
With that, what I'm hearing then is to help us on our way on the board level with the four of us, we've had a motion and a second. It appears from all of my notes that the only thing really that would be a friendly amendment and be adopted into the resolution would be item 1, that pre-construction shall occur with planning, city staff, fire, police, however you want to exactly word that. You can use whatever word, the word jurisdictions. Do you have 17 jurisdictions now at the city? Or are there only 9 that we need to build? But such jurisdictions as deemed appropriate. That if you want to have that exact wording, Bill and Adam, on your case, the construction site, whether it's a monthly or bi-monthly, you had some wordage. Do we want you to articulate exactly what that is, read it back to us so that it can be in?
We can do that right now. And then if somebody wishes to make a friendly amendment to add this in, they can just say, as stated by city staff. We would get the motion maker and the seconder to accept those, and then those would be implemented into the document. So I'll read Adam's first. The applicant shall designate this. So this would be friendly amendment the first condition added on, the applicant shall designate a neighborhood liaison and post contact information at the construction site. That would be 1. Number 2, I don't have it written down. I'm going to go off the top of my head, but I think I can say what I said a minute ago, which is prior to construction, a pre-construction meeting shall be coordinated between planning, building, and other key city staff members and the applicant team and their contractor to go over construction operational details. And I think what we can do, so it would be that.
Yeah, that's fine.
And we can relay what we're hearing tonight.
Thank you. Well, with that, I believe that's clear enough. Is it possible at this time to have the motioner come forward and graft in surgically this into his motion?
What might be easier is if another member could just make a friendly amendment and indicate as stated by city staff, we'd get the motioner and the seconder to accept it, and then that would conclude.
Okay.
I can create the friendly amendment. I'll motion to make a friendly amendment to include the language as stated by city staff. That suffice?
That suffices. Then we would need the original motion maker to accept it, and then the seconder to agree to that.
I will accept the friendly amendment as a motion maker.
I accepted that as the second.
All right.
That's the resolution on the table with the 2 friendly amendment conditions added. And then I'll just note, just for a reminder, this I think we had a mention earlier about final design review. Final design review, as I believe the board will recall, is it's delegated to the director. So that'll be incorporated in this. This is the last time the board will look at it.
Yes. So we then can proceed with a roll call?
Yes, that's correct. So if the recording secretary could call out, we'll do a roll call vote.
Okay. Roll call vote. Board Member Wicks.
Aye.
Board Member Sharon.
Aye.
Board Member McHugh.
Aye.
And Vice Chair Hedgepeth.
Aye.
And Chair Weigel abstained, and Board Member Birch is absent.
So that concludes that item. It was approved with a unanimous vote, and I believe Vice Chair Hedgepeth, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is, I believe, adjournment. And you're muted, Warren.
Yes. Well, I would like to state the meeting as being adjourned at this time, inviting people to leave the meeting and go about their lives.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hedgepeth. So that concludes tonight's Design Review Board meeting. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the members of the public as well. Have a good night, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, applicant. Great presentation.